Have you ever wondered how someone can look completely fine on the outside while everything inside them is slowly falling apart? Not the kind of breakdown people notice, not the kind that makes noise, the quiet kind, the kind that hides behind routine smiles, normal conversations, and days that look the same from the outside. Because sometimes the most dangerous moments in life don't arrive like a storm. They arrive like silence. Slowly, softly, until you can't even tell when things started changing. And maybe that's where you are right now. Or maybe you've felt it before, that strange weight you can't explain, the feeling that you're moving but not really going anywhere. That you're trying, but something invisible keeps pulling you back down. You don't talk about it much because it's hard to explain something that even you don't fully understand. So you carry it alone, day after day, acting like it's nothing, hoping it will pass on its own, but deep down you know something is off. And here's the truth most people never say out loud. Life doesn't usually break in one moment. It breaks in layers. One ignored thought, one mischance, one disappointment you told yourself didn't matter, then another, and another, until suddenly you wake up and realize you are not the same person who started. What makes it worse is how normal everything still looks. People around you don't see the shift. They don't feel the distance growing inside you. They only see what you allow them to see. So you learn to hide it better. You learn to smile when you don't feel like it. You learn to answer, "I'm fine," even when something inside you is clearly not fine at all. And in that space, something dangerous happens. Your mind starts filling the silence with questions. Questions you don't have answers for, questions that repeat when everything gets quiet. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? Why does it feel like I'm losing control of myself? And the more you try to ignore those questions, the louder they become. It feels like you are standing still while life keeps moving without you. Like everyone else figured something out that you missed, and that gap slowly turns into doubt. Not loud doubt, quiet doubt. The kind that doesn't shout at you, but sits with you, follows you, waits for you when you wake up. But listen carefully to this, because this is the part most people never hear when they are in this place. What you are feeling right now is not the end of your story. It is the moment right before things start to shift. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel meaningful. It feels confusing, heavy, unfair. But this is often where change begins, even when you can't see it yet. Because there is still something inside you that hasn't given up, even if it's small, even if it's buried. The fact that you are still here, still thinking, still questioning, still moving through your days, means something in you is still holding on. And that part matters more than anything else right now, so stay with this. Not because everything will suddenly become easy, but because for the first time in a while, you are not being told to ignore what you feel. You are being told to understand it, to sit with it, to stop running from the silence and finally see what it's trying to show you. Because before any rise ever happens, there is always a moment where everything feels like it is quietly falling apart. And then it starts to happen for real. Not in one moment, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that feels almost invisible at first. Like something inside you is slowly losing its grip, and you can't quite tell where it's slipping from. You try to act normal, you try to stay steady, but deep down you can feel it. Something is changing. The same thoughts you used to ignore now come back stronger. The same situations that never used to affect you suddenly feel heavier. Even small things start to feel like proof that you are losing control. A delayed reply, a failed attempt, a simple mistake, and your mind takes each one and turns it into something bigger than it is. This is how pressure builds. Not all at once, but piece by piece, until your own thoughts start working against you. You begin to notice a shift in how you see yourself. You start questioning decisions you once made confidently. You replay moments over and over, trying to find where things went wrong. And slowly, without realizing it, you start trusting your doubts more than you trust yourself. That is the real danger. Not failure, but the way failure starts changing how you think about yourself. Because once that happens, everything feels different. You don't just feel like something went wrong. You start feeling like you are what went wrong. And that belief spreads quietly through your mind, affecting everything you touch, everything you try, everything you hope for. And the worst part is how invisible it is to others. From the outside, life still looks normal. People still expect the same version of you. They still assume you are handling everything the same way you always did, but they don't see the mental weight you are carrying every second just to keep moving. They don't see how much effort it takes just to act okay. And slowly, you start feeling alone in it, not because people left, but because they cannot see what you are going through. And that creates distance. Emotional distance, the kind that grows even in a crowd, the kind that makes you feel like no one would really understand even if you tried to explain. So you stop trying, you keep it inside, you hold it in. You convince yourself that maybe it's not that serious. Maybe you just need to push a little harder. But pushing harder doesn't fix what is happening inside. It only hides it deeper, and this is where the mind becomes dangerous, because when it has no answers, it starts creating its own. It starts telling you stories that feel real even when they are not. It starts convincing you that things won't change, that this is how it will always be, that maybe you are just not enough, and if you are not careful, you start believing it. That belief doesn't explode, it settles quietly, like a weight you carry without noticing at first. Until one day you realize you are no longer trying with the same fire you once had, you are just going through motions, waiting, watching, surviving, and yet, even in this space, something strange is happening underneath it all. Because pressure does not only break people, it also reveals them. It shows what remains when motivation disappears. When applause is gone, when no one is watching, it shows what is still alive inside you when everything else feels like it is falling apart. And right now, even if you cannot feel it clearly, something inside you is still resisting, still questioning, still refusing to fully accept the story your mind is trying to write for you. That resistance is small, almost silent, but it is real, and it matters more than anything else in this moment, because it means you are not finished. It means the story has not locked itself into place yet. It means there is still a part of you that is not fully convinced by the doubt, even if the doubt feels louder right now. And this is where everything begins to tighten, where the pressure stops being just emotional and starts becoming something deeper, something that forces a choice, not between success or failure, but between stopping completely or continuing even when nothing feels certain anymore. And that choice is closer than you think. And when that choice arrives, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with clarity. It doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel like a turning point. It feels like exhaustion. Like you are standing at the edge of your own thoughts, unsure whether to keep fighting them or finally let them win. Because this is where most people quietly stop, not because life ends, but because belief ends first. The belief that things can improve, the belief that effort still matters, the belief that they are still capable of becoming something more than what they are feeling right now. And when that belief fades, everything else follows. You stop trying as hard, you stop expecting change, you start adjusting your life around limitation instead of possibility. You begin to shrink your expectations just to avoid disappointment. And slowly, without realizing it, your world becomes smaller. But what you don't see in that moment is that shrinking is not protection. It is surrender disguised as safety. Because every time you lower your expectations, you lower your potential. Every time you accept less from yourself, you become used to less. And the mind adapts quickly to whatever you repeat often enough, even if it is pain. That is how people get stuck, not in one failure, but in repeated acceptance of less than what they are capable of. And yet, even here, something refuses to fully disappear. It is not loud, it is not confident, it is not even strong yet. But it is persistent. It keeps showing up in the background of your thoughts, a question that doesn't leave you alone, a thought that refuses to fully die out. What if I still try? That question is dangerous because it interrupts the cycle. It creates tension between giving up and continuing, and your mind hates that tension. It wants certainty. It wants final decisions, it wants closure, but that question keeps everything open, and that is where the shift begins. Not in action, not in success, but in the refusal to fully surrender mentally, because the moment you stop completely accepting the story that everything is over, you create space for something new. Even if nothing around you changes yet, even if your situation still feels heavy, something inside you starts to realign, and that realignment is quiet, no celebration, no sudden motivation, just a subtle return of awareness, a small sense that maybe, just maybe, the way things are right now is not the final version of your life. And once that thought enters, it cannot be fully removed again. It will come back in moments when you are tired, in moments when you are alone, in moments when everything feels too heavy again, but now it exists. And that changes everything, because now, even in your lowest state, there is contrast, there is another possibility sitting next to your doubt. And that alone is enough to prevent total collapse. This is how people begin to rise, not by escaping difficulty, but by refusing to let difficulty define their entire identity. You start noticing small things again, small actions, small decisions, things that feel insignificant to others, but inside you feel different. You begin to act without waiting for perfect motivation. You begin to move without needing full confidence. And that movement, even if messy, even if slow, starts rebuilding something that was lost, momentum. And momentum does something powerful. It changes how your mind interprets reality. It stops seeing everything as proof of failure and starts seeing things as steps forward, even if they are small, even if they are imperfect. And the more you move, the more your mind adjusts, the more your identity shifts. The more the old version of you starts losing control over your decisions. This is where the invisible battle is won. Not in a single victory, but in repeated resistance. In choosing to continue when stopping feels easier. In choosing to act when thinking feels safer. In choosing to believe that your current state is not your final form. Because right now, the version of you that struggled is not who you are. It is only where you have been. And where you go next depends on what you decide to do in moments like this. And now you reach the point where everything feels irreversible. Not because it truly is, but because your mind tries to convince you that it is. That is the final layer of pressure. when thoughts stop sounding like opinions and start sounding like facts, when doubt stops feeling temporary and starts feeling permanent, when pain stops feeling like an experience and starts feeling like identity. This is where most people become trapped without even realizing it. Because once you believe you are stuck, you stop looking for exits. Once you believe nothing changes, you stop creating change. Once you believe you are behind, you stop moving forward, and the world doesn't need to defeat you at that point. You defeat yourself quietly through resignation, but there is something deeper happening beneath that noise. Even now, your mind is still searching, still analyzing, still reacting. It hasn't shut down, it hasn't gone silent. It is still trying to solve the situation, even if it is using fear instead of clarity, even if it is using doubt instead of direction. That means you are still engaged with life, even in your lowest moments, and engagement means possibility. Because the moment a person is completely done, there is no more struggle inside them, no more questions. No more resistance, but you are not there. You are still here, still aware, still feeling the weight of your thoughts instead of disappearing into them. That awareness is not weakness, it is pressure building toward change, and pressure always demands an outcome. Either it crushes something or it creates something stronger. Right now, it feels like crushing, but what you don't see is the internal restructuring happening underneath it. Every moment you question your situation, you are no longer fully accepting it. Every moment you resist your doubt, you are weakening its control. Every moment you continue despite uncertainty, you are rewriting your internal limits. This is not motivation. This is transformation in real time, slow, uncomfortable, invisible to others, but real, and here is the part your mind tries to ignore. The version of you that feels broken right now is not stable. It is temporary. It is a reaction to pressure, not a permanent state of being. But your mind, when under stress, begins to treat temporary states as permanent truths. That is where distortion begins. That is where people lose themselves without realizing it. But you are still questioning it. And questioning breaks distortion. Because doubt can either destroy you or wake you up. It depends on what direction you give it. If doubt turns inward, it becomes self-destruction. But if doubt turns outward, it becomes awareness. It forces you to ask better questions. Not why am I like this, but what is actually happening to me right now. That small shift changes everything. Because now you are no longer identifying with the struggle. You are observing it. And observation creates space, space between you and your thoughts, space between you and your emotions, space between you and the story your mind is trying to lock you into, and in that space, something powerful returns. Choice, and choice is where everything changes, not instantly, not dramatically, but fundamentally. Because once you realize you are not fully controlled by what you feel, you begin to separate identity from emotion. You stop saying, I am broken, and start realizing I am experiencing something difficult. That shift alone begins to dissolve the weight. And as that weight begins to dissolve, something else starts to rise underneath it. Clarity, not perfect clarity. Not full understanding, but enough clarity to take the next step. Enough clarity to stop the spiral. Enough clarity to act without waiting for certainty. And action, even small action, becomes the opposite of collapse. Because collapse is stillness under pressure, but action, even imperfect action, is movement under pressure, and movement always signals life, always signals resistance, always signals that something inside you is refusing to end here. And that refusal matters more than anything else you have felt so far, because it means the story is still open. It means the ending has not been decided. It means the version of you that feels buried is not gone. It is just waiting for you to stop agreeing with the version that says you cannot rise. And the moment you stop agreeing, everything begins to shift again. And the moment you stop agreeing with the version of you that feels defeated, something dangerous happens inside your mind. The old narrative loses its authority. It doesn't disappear instantly. It doesn't vanish completely. But it starts to lose its grip. Because every time you choose awareness over assumption, action over avoidance, presence over fear, you weaken the structure that kept you trapped. And your mind notices that shift before anything else does. It starts resisting harder at first. That is normal. Because anything that has controlled you for a long time does not release easily. It fights back through thoughts, memories, and fears that feel extremely real. It brings up the past. It exaggerates mistakes. It reminds you of every moment you failed to become what you once imagined. But that resistance is not truth, it is defense, a defense built to keep you in a familiar version of yourself, even if that version is painful. The mind prefers known pain over unknown change, because unknown change feels like risk, and risk feels like danger. So it keeps pulling you backward, trying to return you to the old emotional state where everything felt predictable. But something in you is no longer fully returning. Even when the thoughts come back, they don't land the same way. Even when fear rises, it doesn't completely control you. Even when doubt speaks loudly, a part of you is now watching it instead of becoming it. That separation is small, but it is irreversible. Because once you see your thoughts as something happening to you instead of something defining you, the structure of control begins to collapse. And that collapse is not destruction, it is release. You begin to realize something that changes everything about how you move through life. You are not the voice in your head. You are not the fear that appears in stressful moments. You are not the memory of your lowest days. You are the awareness observing all of it. And that awareness is not fragile. It is steady. It does not break the way emotions break. It does not panic the way thoughts panic. It simply sees, and in seeing, it creates distance, and in distance, you regain power. This is where everything begins to reorganize. Your decisions start shifting, not because your life is suddenly easier, but because your identity is no longer fully attached to failure. You stop reacting automatically to every thought. You stop treating every emotion as an instruction. You start pausing where you used to collapse. You start choosing where you used to escape. And that pause is everything. Because in that pause, the entire direction of your life is decided. Most people never notice this moment. They move too fast through their thoughts to realize they have a choice. They believe urgency is truth. They believe discomfort means stop. They believe fear means danger, so they follow the feeling instead of observing it. And in doing so, they repeat the same patterns again and again. But now you are no longer fully inside that loop. There is distance. There is awareness. There is a new layer of control forming underneath the chaos. And even if it feels unstable, even if it feels unfamiliar, it is real. And that real shift starts to influence behavior in subtle ways. You don't wait as long to act. You don't abandon yourself as quickly. You don't spiral as deeply into every setback. Something inside you starts refusing to fully collapse under pressure. Not because pressure is gone, but because your relationship with it has changed. And that change is what people call growth. even though it rarely feels like growth in the moment. It feels like tension. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like standing between two versions of yourself, one pulling you back into familiarity, the other pulling you forward into something you cannot fully see yet. And that tension is where transformation lives, because you cannot remain the same when you are no longer fully believing the same thoughts. You cannot stay trapped when you are no longer fully identifying with the trap. You cannot stay broken when part of you has already started rebuilding in silence. And this rebuilding does not ask for permission. It happens through repetition, through awareness, through small decisions that seem insignificant but quietly reshape everything underneath. Until one day you realize the version of you that once felt impossible to escape is no longer the strongest voice in your mind. It has been replaced not by certainty but by something far more powerful, choice that you finally recognize as yours. And when you finally recognize that choice as yours, something inside you shifts in a way you cannot reverse. Not because everything becomes easy, but because everything becomes clearer. The chaos doesn't disappear, but it stops feeling like a prison. It starts feeling like a place you can move through instead of a place you are trapped inside. That difference is everything. Because before this moment, every emotion felt like a command. Every thought felt like truth. Every fear felt like a warning you had to obey. But now there is space between what you feel and what you do. And in that space, something powerful is born. Control, not the kind of control that removes struggle, but the kind that changes how you respond to it. And that response is where your entire life begins to reshape itself. You stop reacting automatically. You start noticing patterns. The same thoughts that used to pull you down now feel familiar, almost predictable. And once something becomes predictable, it loses its power to surprise you, and once it loses surprise, it loses control. That is how fear begins to weaken, not by disappearing, but by being understood. And understanding changes everything, because now you are no longer inside the emotion. You are observing it. You are no longer drowning in the thought. You are watching it rise and fall like something separate from you. And in that separation, you regain something most people never realize they lost. Authority over themselves, but this authority does not feel dramatic. It feels quiet. It feels like choosing to continue when stopping feels easier. It feels like not believing every negative thought that shows up. It feels like resisting the urge to define yourself by temporary moments. And those small decisions begin to stack. At first, they feel insignificant, almost invisible, but repetition is where identity is rebuilt. Because what you repeat becomes what you accept, and what you accept becomes what you believe, and what you believe becomes how you live without even thinking about it. That is why change is never one moment. It is a direction, and right now, that direction is shifting. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably, you start noticing that the same situations that once broke you don't hit the same way anymore. Not because they are easier, but because you are no longer the same receiver of them. Your internal structure is changing. Your tolerance for collapse is decreasing. Your ability to recover is increasing. And this is where most people underestimate their own transformation. They think change should feel like arrival, like confidence, like certainty, but real change often feels like discomfort because it challenges the identity that was built through struggle. And letting go of that identity feels like losing something, even when what you are losing is limitation. So you feel the tension, the pull between old patterns and new awareness, between reaction and response. between giving up and continuing, and that tension is not confusion, it is evolution in progress, because you cannot move into a stronger version of yourself without first feeling the resistance of the version you are leaving behind. And that resistance will try to pull you back. It will use memories, it will use doubt, it will use fear disguised as logic. It will tell you to stop before you fail again. It will tell you to stay safe where you are. It will try to convince you that nothing has changed. But something has already changed. You are no longer blindly believing it. And that is the fracture in the old system. Once belief breaks, control weakens. And once control weakens, you begin to choose instead of react. Even if it is messy, even if it is inconsistent, even if it feels uncertain, choice is now entering places where habit used to dominate. And with every choice, the old identity loses strength. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, like something dissolving from the inside without making noise, and what replaces it is not a perfect version of you. Not an idealized version, but something far more real, a version of you that stays present under pressure, a version of you that does not fully collapse under doubt, a version of you that keeps moving even when clarity is not guaranteed. And that version does not arrive fully formed. It is built through moments like this, through awareness that interrupts old cycles, through decisions that break automatic patterns, through the quiet refusal to let temporary feelings define permanent direction. And now the path ahead is no longer about escaping what broke you. It is about becoming someone who cannot be broken in the same way again.